What's going on, everyone? Welcome back to another episode of the JT Sports Podcast. I'm your host, JT. Got a really exciting episode for you guys. We got college football, Week 11 breakdowns. We got to talk Michigan, Penn State, Alabama, Kentucky, Tennessee, Mizzou, Colorado, Arizona, and we got some more games that we're going to be talking about on tonight's episode. Got some NFL things that I want to get into. CJ Stroud's record-breaking performance against the Buccaneers. I got some really strong opinions about it. And Daniel Jones towards ACL. What does that mean for his future with the New York Giants? Before we get into tonight's episode, leave a like, subscribe to the channel. Remember that we're not just a YouTube channel. Every episode of the JT Sports Podcast that's uploaded on the YouTube channel you can find on every podcasting platform. Apple, Google, Spotify, Amazon, wherever you get your podcast from, the JT Sports Podcast is available. If you enjoyed tonight's episode, give us a 5-star review, share the podcast with your friends, family members, and acquaintances. It's free. It's the best way to support the channel. It only takes like 10-15 seconds to do so. Go ahead. If you listen to podcasts, give us a 5-star review on Apple and Spotify. Link to the Apple and Spotify podcast is down in the description down below. Or you can type in the JT Sports Podcast on any podcasting platform and it will pop up. So I want to get into this first, right? CJ Stroud led the Houston Texans to a come-from-behind win against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. And during this performance, he broke the single-game passing yard record for a rookie quarterback. He had 5 touchdowns, and he threw for 407 yards. And, you know, when you think about this performance, right, I'm not going to say that I saw this coming because I didn't. Now, I've known that CJ Stroud is a really good quarterback. Hell, I already consider him to be a top 10 quarterback. But there's no way I expected him to carve up a defense led by a defensive-minded coach in Todd Bowles. And let me ask you guys something. Todd Bowles, at this point, do you think it would be wrong for the Buccaneers just to go ahead and give him the pink slip? Because Josh McDaniels got the pink slip after they lost Monday night to the Detroit Lions. What makes this loss any difference from this one? Look, the Buccaneers, they were 3-1 at one point, right? They've lost 4 straight since that hot start. And getting shredded by a rookie quarterback when you're a defensive-minded coach in this kind of fashion where a guy like CJ Stroud is making history against you, I think is a fireable offense. And I know what people are going to say in defense of Todd Bowles. They're going to say, oh, CJ Stroud is a great quarterback, JT. You can't give him too much criticism. What do you mean I can't? He's a defensive-minded coach. A rookie quarterback, regardless how good they may be, should not be shredding your defense for 400-plus yards and 5 freaking touchdowns. That is inexcusable. There's no reason why CJ Stroud should have been able to drive Houston, give them the game-winning touchdown with less than a minute on the clock. Todd Bowles is one of the worst head coaches in NFL history. Straight up. This Buccaneers team is not that bad. They exceeded expectations up to this point, and now they're starting to crash back down to earth. And every time you listen to a Todd Bowles post-game press conference, it's the same thing. We can't beat ourselves. Like, it can't be Bucs versus Bucs. Like, I'm tired of hearing the same old post-game speech from Todd Bowles. I'm just tired of seeing him in Tampa. Tampa barely made it to the postseason last year with the greatest quarterback of all time, and they brought him back. Dave Canales was a really good hire, but at this point, I feel it would be better if you fire Todd Bowles and make Dave Canales the interim head coach for the rest of the season, because the defense looked abysmal against a Houston Texans team that doesn't have a great offensive line. They don't have a great run game. They don't have great wide receivers. They're not really a super talented team. They're well coached, led by a really good quarterback in CJ Stroud. That's understandable. But to allow CJ Stroud to make history against your defense, 5 touchdowns, 407 yards passing, completing 71% of your passes, and you're a defensive-minded coach, that's embarrassing. Let's not forget, when CJ Stroud played against the Carolina Panthers, that probably was his worst game of the season. If you're a defensive-minded coach You should not be allowing a rookie quarterback to put up these kinds of numbers against you. CJ Stroud is one of the best quarterbacks in the league. I would take CJ Stroud over a handful of quarterbacks. Hell, I would take him over Dak Prescott, Baker Mayfield. I would take him over any quarterback right now starting for any team in the NFC South. That's how good he is. He's a top 10 quarterback. He's an elite quarterback. It doesn't take long to figure out how good a guy is. If a guy comes out looking like a top 10 quarterback, they're a top 10 quarterback. There's no threshold that you have to wait to claim that somebody is an elite quarterback. Either you see it and you just go ahead and call them an elite quarterback, or you just play the waiting game. Like, CJ Stroud is a great quarterback, but just because he's a fantastic rookie quarterback doesn't mean it should be used as an excuse for Todd Bowles keeping his job and allowing this shit to happen. Todd Bowles is not a good coach. They've lost 4 straight now, and they probably are going to continue to lose. When you're a poorly coached team, you get poor results. And this is a game that I feel is a fireable offense. There's no way you can call yourself a defensive-minded coach and allow CJ Stroud to look like he was Tom Brady against your defense. Literally, nothing that Tampa did defensively worked, especially in the second half. CJ Stroud, it's like he had the X-Factor ability in Madden where he could see any coverage that the Tampa Bay Buccaneers threw at him. He was hitting Noah Brown on big plays downfield. Tank Dell was cooking this defense. Todd Bowles should not still have a job right now. He's one of those coaches that is a good coordinator, but not head coach material. His best season was when he was with the New York Jets and they had Brandon Marshall and Ryan Fitzpatrick. I think that was 2015, 2016? The Buccaneers have to move on from Todd Bowles. Like, if the Detroit Lions beat the Raiders so bad that they decided to fire their GM and Josh McDaniels at 1 a.m. in the morning, what's the difference between this result and that result? Hell, Josh McDaniels should have got fired after they lost to Tyson Bagent, who was playing Division II football around this time last year. CJ Stroud is a rookie quarterback. He didn't even do this to the Steelers defense. And he had a good performance in that game, but he didn't make history. This is embarrassing. If you're Todd Bowles, I don't know how you can wake up, look at yourself in the mirror, and consider yourself a great defensive-minded coach when a rookie quarterback just destroys your defense this way. This is embarrassing. He should not still have a job. And I'm not somebody who likes to come on here and call for people's jobs, but when there's somebody who deserves to be fired, who needs to be fired, something has to be said. We all keep talking about CJ Stroud and how great he played against the Buccaneers. And I'm not taking anything away from him. I'm giving him all the credit in the world. But on the flip end of this, I also have to look at this from an angle of Todd Bowles being a defensive-minded coach and CJ Stroud pooping on this defense. Literally pooping on this defense. You would have thought that CJ Stroud was a 15-year veteran with the way he was carving up Todd Bowles' defense. This is inexcusable. And if you're a Buccaneers fan, are you really okay with this? Like, I don't get how Bucs fans aren't protesting outside of Tampa Bay headquarters right now, trying to get this dude out of there. He's awful. He doesn't make great adjustments. His defense hasn't been great this year, and you allow a rookie quarterback to set records against you. Records. And I'm going to say this one last time. I'm not saying this to take anything away from CJ Stroud. CJ Stroud deserves every bit of recognition for this historical performance. Anytime you break a rookie passing yard record in a game, you deserve a lot of props for it, especially when you do it against a defensive-minded coach, or at least somebody who we think is a defensive-minded coach. But at the same time, we got to look at the other end of the spectrum. It's easy just to look at CJ Stroud carving up the Buccaneers defense and not look at this from the angle of Todd Bowles being a defensive-minded coach and allowing CJ Stroud to have this kind of performance. Like, this performance by CJ Stroud was so good that it should have gotten Todd Bowles fired right after the game. If Josh McDaniels is getting a pink slip after losing to Detroit on Monday Night Football, then so should Todd Bowles, especially when Baker Mayfield led this team downfield, put them in position to win this game, and the defense blew the game. They blew away the win. You're a defensive-minded coach. You should have every bit of confidence with your defense being on the field, being able to close out a game for you. Your defense should never be the reason why you lose a kind of game like this, and you definitely shouldn't have a defense that's giving up 5 touchdowns to a rookie quarterback. I can't recall the last time a rookie quarterback threw 5 touchdowns in a single game. This is embarrassing if you're a Tampa Bay Buccaneers fan, and it has to be god-awful embarrassing to be Todd Bowles. I think Todd Bowles should be fired. And with the way CJ Stroud played, it's a fireable offense in my opinion. Daniel Jones tore his ACL against the Las Vegas Raiders. Just when you thought the New York Giants season couldn't get any worse, it gets worse. This is just like a giant nightmare for Brian Daboll and this whole entire New York Giants organization. And when they paid Daniel Jones that 4-year extension for $160 million, I was never in agreement with it. And I was going back and forth with New York Giants fans all off season about it. And I never thought that this move was going to work out in their favor. You see, I'm so tired of the argument of he's good enough if you give him a good team. Good enough doesn't win you championships. Why would you settle for good when you could have gone out there and gotten great? You see, that's the problem with a lot of people in life. Complacency is a really big thing that a lot of people struggle with. It's okay to be comfortable. The Giants were comfortable with Daniel Jones, but they could have gone out there and gotten better. There was nobody else in free agency who was going to give Daniel Jones this kind of contract. The New York Giants deserve to be in this situation for the stupid decision to pay Daniel Jones, and they paid him before Saquon. And although people say you're not supposed to pay a running back, I would have paid Saquon way before I would have ever thought about paying Daniel Jones. You see, Daniel Jones is just like how Geno Smith is right now. They were good stories in 2022. They were able to lead their teams to the playoffs after being counted out. Nobody really thought they could be all that great. They were a cool story. But cool stories aren't meant to be read every single day. Some stories you read once and you move on to the next book. This reminds me a lot of the situation that the Jacksonville Jaguars were in when they gave Blake Bortles that extension after he led them to the AFC Championship game. Blake Bortles was never good enough to be a franchise quarterback for Jacksonville. He just was able to lead Jacksonville to the AFC Championship that year because they had a great defense, and he was good enough to take care of the football and did what he needed to do for Jacksonville's offense to be serviceable. You see, that's the thing with Daniel Jones. Like, he's a serviceable quarterback. But if we were to rank him in tiers of elite quarterbacks, good quarterbacks, and bad quarterbacks, he will fall in the bad quarterback category. And yeah, the situation that he was in this year wasn't ideal. The offensive line was awful, just as bad as what it was last year. The receivers still suck. But Giants fans were gassing up, trading for an injury-prone tight end and Darren Waller. Where is he at right now? Along with Daniel Jones in a damn hospital bed. The offensive line is still terrible. After Giants fans made it seem like the offensive line could have been better, the defense is still okay. The Giants were no better of a team this season than what they were last year. They had the benefit playing against weaker competition, and that's why they were able to win with Daniel Jones. I'm so tired of people making it seem like you can win with a game manager as long as you have the right situation. Yeah, that's if you have the right situation, but not every team is smart enough to build the team similar to how John Lynch and Kyle Shanahan have done with the 49ers when you can plug and play every single quarterback. I'm a Steelers fan, and I would tell you straight up that I don't think Kenny Pickett is it. Having an okay quarterback is not good enough to win you a Super Bowl in today's league, or to take a team that was, one of the worst teams in the NFL to a Super Bowl contender. You mean to tell me that Brian Daboll and whoever is the GM of the New York Giants thought that Daniel Jones was good enough to ever lead this team to a Super Bowl? What? Meanwhile, Lamar Jackson was a restricted free agent, and all you had to do was give up a couple of first-round picks, paying what he wanted, and you could have had a drastic upgrade at quarterback. Daniel Jones isn't the kind of quarterback that can carry your team. He's not the kind of quarterback that can will you to wins like a Lamar Jackson or a Joe Burrow or a Patrick Mahomes. I mean, we make fun of Dak Prescott, but Dak Prescott and Kirk Cousins are quarterbacks that you can win with. You can't win or have a lot of success with a guy like Daniel Jones. He hasn't been good this year. Before he went down with that injury, he had 2 touchdowns and 6 interceptions on the season. The only 2 touchdowns those came from was when they barely managed to beat the Arizona Cardinals. Daniel Jones should have never gotten that extension by the New York Giants, and most of us knew when they gave Daniel Jones that deal, it was a horrible decision. And if you were one of the people who were a Daniel Jones believer, you look back now and you like, yeah, like that probably wasn't a smart move. Now, you do have to build a good team around him, which the Giants did a poor job of doing. But when you have a great quarterback, he can overcome limitations. Daniel Jones can't overcome having a bad receiving core. He can't overcome having a bad offensive line. The coaching isn't the problem. We still view Brian Daboll as one of the best offensive minds in the league. So what is the reasoning for the drop-off this season? Oh, maybe it's because the Giants are playing tougher competition and having Daniel Jones going up against some of the best teams in the NFL that have some of the best quarterbacks in the game aren't going to get it done. Even before he went down against the Las Vegas Raiders, he was getting outplayed by Aiden O'Connell. Like, Daniel Jones, him being out for the season, yes, nobody wants to see a player go down, no matter how we feel about how good or how bad they are. Injuries are always unfortunate. But Daniel Jones, let's not make it seem like a couple of weeks ago, Giants fans and many people weren't having a discussion who's the better quarterback, Daniel Jones or Tyrod Taylor. Anytime you're having a discussion about your backup being potentially better than your starter, that's a huge problem. The Giants should have went out there and traded for Joshua Dobbs. Same thing with the New York Jets. There's no way New York actually believed that this dude was good enough to bring this team to another Lombardi trophy. Like, there's a rumor that keeps going around that the Giants ownership wanted to re-sign Daniel Jones because he reminds them a lot of Eli Manning. Like, what? Don't you ever disrespect Eli Manning like that. Say what you want about Eli Manning. In big games in the postseason, Eli Manning elevated his game. Daniel Jones had a great playoff game against a terrible Minnesota Vikings defense. A Minnesota Vikings team that most people would consider to be the most overrated team in NFL history. They had an awful point differential. They came back from behind in multiple games. They had to come back to beat the Indianapolis Colts. That wasn't a great team. Sometimes you're not always what your record says you are. And then what happened the following week when the New York Giants played the Philadelphia Eagles? They got smashed. And Daniel Jones got outplayed by Jalen Hurts. And although the talent differential was a really big deciding factor in the way that game went, when you have an elite quarterback, there's not a single game that you don't have a chance to win. But when you got a Daniel Jones at the helm at quarterback, there's just certain games that you look at and you say, yeah, like, we might as well just go ahead and throw in the towel. We don't have a shot. I think when it comes to Daniel Jones' future with the New York Giants, he most likely is going to be back next season. All right. They don't really have the ability to move on from this contract unless they just want to take $69.3 million in dead cap, which I doubt they want to do. You're going to bring Daniel Jones back next season. You definitely have to draft a quarterback in the upcoming 2024 NFL draft. It doesn't have to be a first-round pick. You don't have to draft a quarterback in the first round, but you got to draft a quarterback that has some potential to be a potential starter in the NFL. Maybe a Jaden Daniels. Jaden Daniels for LSU, he's pretty nice. Hell, if J.J. McCarthy or Quinn Ewers is there in the second round, go ahead and take them. You just need a quarterback that has some potential. So therefore, if Daniel Jones has another awful season, when you build this roster up, because the Giants are going to have to build this roster up. They're going to have to rebuild that offensive line. They're going to have to add a superstar wide receiver, not a Paris Campbell. And you're going to have to get a better defense for you to be able to win with Daniel Jones. And if you give Daniel Jones a better team and he still struggles, you go and you throw in Jaden Daniels, or you go and you start Quinn Ewers. The Giants are going to have another season of Daniel Jones underneath center because his contract, It doesn't allow you to get out of it until 2025. And even then, your out is you taking a dead cap hit of $22.21 million. So you're still stuck with Daniel Jones for the next 2 seasons, whether you want to like it or not. And you're going to have to find a way to win with that. He's a good athlete. I'll give him that. He's one of the best rushing quarterbacks in the NFL, but he's not a great thrower of the football. He throws a nice deep ball, but I don't think he really has a good understanding of reading defenses, and he's regressed. And this is coming from a guy who currently is their head coach, who is regarded as one of the best offensive minds in the NFL. So if you're regressing under Brian Daboll, what does that show about you as a player? The Giants are going to be stuck with Daniel Jones for the next 2 seasons. I don't think he's played his final snap with New York. I definitely think that he has a couple of years left due to the magnitude of his contract, but this just was an awful decision to extend a mid-quarterback. Daniel Jones was okay last season. There were people trying to say he could have potentially become a top 10, top 12 quarterback. Like, no. You see, anytime a team has a quarterback that nobody really likes and he has one good season, people try to find ways to get excited about them. Nobody in the New York Giants fan base was happy when they drafted Daniel Jones over Dwayne Haskins. R.I.P. Dwayne Haskins. Nobody wanted Daniel Jones. And now he had one good season and everybody was trying to hop on the bandwagon. Like, you need more than one good season to submit yourself as a serviceable starting quarterback in this league. If I was Joe Schoen and Brian Daboll, I would have gave Daniel Jones another 1-year deal. I would have been like, if you feel like I'm disrespecting you, go in free agency and find another team that's willing to give you a long-term deal with the salary that you're asking for. I can't believe the New York Giants really caved in to Daniel Jones' contract demands. For what? The dude isn't good. He's like a bottom-tier quarterback. Daniel Jones is one of those quarterbacks that you start to be a bridge quarterback until you can find a potential upgrade. The Giants deserve to be in a situation that they're in. You know, it wasn't really smart on their behalf giving Daniel Jones a long-term extension when he only showed you one good year of competent quarterback play. And now he's out for the season, and your nightmarish season continues to unravel and get even worse. It's like Nightmare on Elm Street, damn near. Before we get into our college football Week 11 game breakdowns, if you haven't already, leave a like, subscribe to the channel. Remember that we go live Monday through Thursday. We go live after Monday and Thursday night football after the games. We talk college football, NFL draft 24/7, raw, uncut, unbiased analysis. If this is the kind of football content that you love, you're in the right place. Subscribe to the JT Sports Podcast. Leave a like. Share the podcast with your friends, family members, and acquaintances. Check out the JT Sports Podcast in audio format on all podcasting platforms: Apple, Google, Spotify, Amazon. If you enjoyed tonight's episode, give us a 5-star review. We will greatly appreciate it. All right, so now we get into something that I've been dying all day to talk about. Week 11, college football game breakdowns and preview. We got to start with the game of the week. Michigan traveling to Happy Valley to take on Penn State. Penn State is about to expose the truth about this Michigan football team this year. There's a good amount of people who claim that Michigan is the best team in college football. Well, now it's their chance to prove it. Because I don't get how you can consider yourself the best team in college football when you're beating up on sorry teams. For you to be considered the best, you have to beat the best. And Michigan has yet to do that up to this point. Now, I'm not questioning Michigan's talent. Michigan is one of the most talented teams in all of college football. They got a veteran team with a lot of experience on both sides of the football, and J.J. McCarthy has looked really good. And you look at Penn State. The last time we saw Penn State matched up in a big game against a big-time opponent, they didn't really look like they belonged on the field with Ohio State in that loss. And although that game was close by the box score, Ohio State, defensively, they neutralized and absolutely boxed Drew Aller in this Penn State offense. I was really disappointed with what I saw out of Drew Aller the last go-around when they were matched up against a top 5, top 10 opponent. Now, they bounced back in a major way against Maryland. And with them playing at home, the home field advantage definitely gives them an added boost and a great chance to be able to pull off this upset. Because believe it or not, 70% of bettors have put their money on Penn State to win this game outright. And why is that? Is that because you just don't know how good of a team Michigan truly is? Like, you can't judge any team based on what they did last season because every season is different. Hell, people thought that Ohio State was going to be way better than what they've shown so far. And with Michigan beating up on bad teams, we truly don't know just how good of a team this actually is. Now, if they come in and they roll Penn State like how they've rolled Indiana and Bowling Green, then I'll give Michigan all the respect in the world. But until they're able to prove it on the field that they have what it takes to blow out a top 10 team, I'm not going to consider this the best team in college football. And Penn State is going to show us the truth about this Michigan football team. Are they indeed one of the best teams in college football? And you look at JJ McCarthy. There's people who are trying to make a Heisman argument for JJ McCarthy. I haven't seen JJ McCarthy go up against any of the top teams in college football. So why does he deserve to be in the Heisman conversation? If Michigan wants to prove they're the number one team and JJ McCarthy wants to prove that he deserves to be viewed as a legitimate contender for the Heisman Trophy, this game means everything for Michigan. And if they're an elite team like how we feel they are, they should be able to go on the road and handle business because elite teams, what do they do best? They find ways to win, whether they're at home or on the road. Penn State, I think that they match up very well with Ohio State. I don't care if Penn State has a younger roster than Michigan. Penn State is really good up front on both sides of the football. They got one of the best offensive lines in college football and one of the most talented defensive lines in college football. So I don't think that Michigan is going to just neuter Penn State up front. Penn State also happens to have the number one run defense in all of America. What does Michigan do best? They run the football. And if this becomes a game where Michigan has to win this game by just airing the football out with JJ McCarthy, I don't feel it's going to go in their favor. The last time Michigan had to win a game when they were going air raid, they lost to TCU. And we can say JJ McCarthy has made massive leaps and bounds in improvement, but does Michigan have the kind of personnel at wide receiver to be able to win a shootout where they have to throw the ball 30 plus to win? I don't think so. You see, what hurt Penn State and their loss to Ohio State was their lack of talent and depth at the wide receiver position. You're going up against a Michigan team that kind of is built similarly to what Penn State has. What is Michigan's talent? What is their outstanding trait about them? The fact that they're such a physical football team and they can wear you down with Blake Corum and Donovan Edwards. They don't have a stacked group of wide receivers. Now, they got talent there, but I don't think there's any difference between the wide receivers of Michigan and the wide receivers of Penn State. And the fact that Penn State is so good against the run, if they can slow down that rushing attack and they can hold Michigan to under 100 yards rushing and JJ McCarthy has to win this game with his arm, this becomes a game that could go either way. Now, if Michigan can come in here and play their style of football, they can play bully ball, and they can just ground and pound Penn State, then they're probably going to win this game. Drew Aller, like JJ McCarthy, he has a lot to prove. And so does James Franklin. James Franklin, to me, is super overrated. He is getting paid a lot of money, and yet he's not producing high-end results. He's 3-16 against top 10 opponents. That's unacceptable. Penn State had multiple chances to beat Ohio State. Ohio State didn't have a great offense. The key to Ohio State beating Penn State was the fact that they had Maserati Marv. That was it. Michigan doesn't have a Maserati Marvin Harrison at receiver. They got a solid group of tight ends and okay receivers. So if you're Penn State and James Franklin, you slow down that run game, you feel pretty confident about your chances. But what about how your offense matches up against Michigan's defense? Michigan has a really talented secondary. Mike Sanders still. You got a really good up-and-coming cornerback in Will Johnson, who is a athletic freak and has a similar athletic profile and build to Christian Gonzalez. I wonder how he's going to match up against whoever he has to guard in this Penn State wide receiver room. Penn State needs to get more production out of their wide receivers in this game if they want to be able to win. Drew Aller was #1 quarterback recruit coming out of his recruiting class. There's no reason why he should struggle in this game. You see, for Penn State to get over the top, you need Drew Aller to play at a high level. You see, J.J. McCarthy, Jim Harbaugh feels like he finally has his Himothy at quarterback. Ryan Day has CJ Stroud and Justin Fields, 2 really great quarterbacks. Does James Franklin finally has his and Drew Aller? Or is he the reason why some of the quarterbacks in the past, like Trace McSorley and Sean Clifford, have underachieved to an extent? Drew Aller is supposed to be the most talented quarterback that Penn State has ever had come through this program, and he has to prove it in this game. You see, quarterbacks like Drew Aller are supposed to be program changers. Drew Aller is supposed to be the difference between Penn State coming up short and being able to get over the top. When you have this transcendent level of talent at quarterback, you should be able to win big games like this, okay? And it's not like, although Penn State is weak at the wide receiver position, that they're weak elsewhere. They got some really good running backs. You got Katron Allen and Nicholas Singleton. That's one of the best running back duos in all of college football. Just as good as Michigan's with Blake Corum and Donovan Edwards. The team I'm taking to win this game, I'm taking Penn State. I'm going to go on a limb and take James Franklin again, even though he made me look retarded when I picked them to beat Ohio State. They're playing at home against Michigan. Michigan hasn't faced a good team all year, and anytime you play to a better opponent than what you have technically played, there's a little bit of an adjustment period. All right, Michigan has been beating up on terrible teams. When you're going up against a team like Penn State, the game's going to be faster. The athleticism is going to be way more, the athleticism is going to be way more impactful. Like, you're not going against anybody that plays for Bowling Green that has the ability that any of these guys on the Penn State defensive line have to get after the quarterback and be able to stop the run. Penn State, I believe, is just as good as Michigan. Michigan just has more experience. Penn State is the younger team, but I don't think there's a big differential in talent between Penn State and Michigan. Michigan has a better offensive line, but I don't think it's by a landslide. Penn State's playing at home. This is supposed to be an elite program, a consistent top 10 program, and you got Drew Aller, a transcendent level quarterback. You should be able to win this game. You got the #1 run defense in all of college football. What Michigan does well is run the football. I don't care how much people try to gas up J.J. McCarthy. He has to show me. And the last time J.J. McCarthy was asked to win a football game, throwing it with no assistance, they lost to TCU. And he didn't really look all that impressive against Ohio State. Like, J.J. McCarthy is a little bit overhyped. People are trying to enamor this guy as the next great Michigan quarterback, a potential first-round pick, when he hasn't shown the ability to play high-level quarterback play against a great defense. And that's what Penn State has. They got a great secondary. They got a great defensive coordinator in Manny Diaz. They got a lot of athletic guys on that front seven who can really get after it. I think that this is going to be a reality check for all the Michigan fans out there that think that this team deserves to be #1 in college football. Alabama rolls on to take on Kentucky. The last time we saw Alabama, they came away with a big-time win against LSU. Now, is this a trap game for the Crimson Tide, right? Because they're a 10.5-point favorite, but they got to go on the road to Lexington to take on a really scrappy Kentucky team. And a Kentucky team that I don't think is great. It's kind of in the middle of the pack. Devin Leary, outside of his standout performance against Tennessee, he's been one of the biggest disappointments out of the transfer portal. He was one of the highest ranked quarterbacks coming out of last year's transfer portal cycle, and he has not lived up to expectations. If Kentucky's going to have a chance at being able to win this game, they need Devin Leary to have the same performance that he had against Tennessee and then some, because they got a good enough group of wide receivers where they should be able to have success generating big plays against Alabama's secondary. Alabama's defense has been outstanding all season long, but this secondary does have a tendency to give up big plays. We saw it really early in that LSU game, in that early touchdown to Malik Neighbors that had Nick Saban going crazy on the sideline saying, oh man, like this shit again? Yeah, like Alabama's defense is really good, but they are a little bit inconsistent when it comes to their ability to limit the big plays in the passing game. So if Devin Leary can have this similar performance that he had against Tennessee, Kentucky has a solid chance to pull off this upset. But Kentucky isn't going to win this game playing their typical style of football where they want to give the ball 20, 30 times to Ray Davis and let him work. That's not going to happen. You're not going to have success running the football on this Alabama front. One thing that Alabama has a lot of is very good defensive linemen up front. And Kentucky's offensive line hasn't been as good as what it has been historically. Historically, Kentucky has always had one of the SEC's premier offensive lines, but not this season. You see, we saw what they did against Florida. They were able to gouge Florida's eyes out on the ground, but they weren't able to replicate that success against Tennessee. And I doubt they're able to replicate that success against Alabama. Alabama knows what Kentucky wants to do. They know their MO. They know that this is a team that is based on physicality. They want to run the football, and they want to impose their will up front against you. The only problem with that is, does Kentucky have the guys up front of their offensive line to really challenge Alabama's defensive line to run the football the way they want to? I don't think so. This game is going to come down to Devin Leary being able to attack this Alabama secondary. And if he is able to have a good game, there's a chance that this could become a trap game for Kentucky, and maybe it doesn't become a one-sided affair. On the other end of things, you got Jalen Milroe, who's coming off the best game that we've seen him play up to this point in his Alabama career, and it looks like Alabama's offense is starting to hit their stride. It's funny how before this season started, the big question mark for Alabama, the reason why Alabama wasn't going to be able to win it all this season was because the concerns we had at quarterback. And now when the final stretch of this year's college football season, and Jalen Milroe is starting to play like a Heisman candidate. He had 4 touchdowns on the ground against LSU. He was unstoppable. Not just was he great on the run, but he also had his best display as a passer. And one thing that's been really overlooked about Jalen Milroe that a lot of people haven't noticed up to the last couple of weeks is that he throws a really nice deep ball, and Alabama has receivers that are now starting to make a name for themselves. They have some legit trustworthy wide receivers that you can count on, and Alabama's also really good running the football themselves. Now, Kentucky's run defense is really good. They're 21st in college football in rushing yards per game allowed. The only problem with that is that they're not a one-dimensional team. Alabama can beat you throwing the football, although it may not be as consistently as you may like it to be, and they can beat you on the ground. I still believe that Alabama, regardless of how good Kentucky's defensive line is still going to be able to have success on the ground in the run game just with how dynamic of an athlete Jalen Milroe is. The defensive line of Kentucky is really good, and Alabama's offensive line is still a little bit shaky. Last week was probably their best performance of the season because they weren't going against a team that had that good of a defensive line. LSU has one of the worst defenses in all of college football. Kentucky's defense is pretty respectable. There's a chance that this game could be really close if Alabama ends up having to air it out themselves the way they kind of don't want to. Like, Jalen Milroe's a solid quarterback. He reminds me a lot of Blake Sims. Y'all remember Blake Sims? All the diehard Alabama fans probably remember who he is, but Jalen Milroe reminds me of a more athletic and juiced up version of him. And you see, he can win throwing the football, but he's not a guy who is going to do it pretty. Okay, he may have a couple of games where he looks on fire, but against this Kentucky defense, you know, he has the opportunity to throw a couple of interceptions, give the ball away a couple of times. You know, the thing with Jalen Milroe is that he's a solid quarterback, but he doesn't always give you consistent play on a game-to-game basis. And you wonder how he's going to perform on the road in Lexington. I'm still taking the Tide to win this game. I think that they just overall the more complete team than Kentucky, and I think they win this game pretty convincingly. Give me Alabama 31-10, final score. Like Kentucky, I don't trust Devin Leary. I don't trust their offensive line in this game. And although their defensive line is pretty formidable, we saw what Alabama was able to do the last time they went against a formidable defensive line in Tennessee. Tennessee also has a pretty solid defensive line. And in the second half, they were doing whatever they wanted to at times. Give me Alabama to win. Now, this is the game that I'm the most excited for. We got Tennessee versus Missouri. This is pretty much the game that's going to decide if Tennessee's game against Georgia becomes the SEC East Championship game, depending on how that Ole Miss Georgia game ends. If Georgia loses to Ole Miss and Tennessee beats Missouri, then Tennessee potentially could be playing Georgia for a trip to go to Atlanta. But they're going to have to beat a really good Missouri team, and they're only a 1-point favorite in this game. This game pretty much is a pick-em, and these two teams are really evenly matched. Missouri, they had a pretty good fight against Georgia, but they just didn't have enough. Their defensive line is really good. Their defensive line was really getting after Carson Beck. They also have a pretty balanced offense. They're pretty solid throwing the football. They also can run the football pretty well also. But the thing is that I don't know how good the quarterback play is going to be for Missouri in this game. Brady Cook, he started this season out really strong. He looked like one of the best quarterbacks in the SEC, but over the last couple of weeks, he hasn't looked so hot. You look at Joe Milton on the other end, this was somebody who people had pretty high expectations for. And I'm not going to say that Joe Milton has been a disappointment because he hasn't been bad. It's just that you kind of expect a little bit better. This isn't the same Tennessee offense that we saw in 2022, that's for sure. They haven't really been able to generate the amount of big plays at will that they were able to do last season. And Joe Milton at times can be a little shaky as a passer. Now, he's been really involved over the last couple of weeks in the run game. They've been running him a good bit. Quarterback power, design quarterback runs. And Tennessee has a really good rushing attack. And what people kind of overlook about Tennessee is how physical this team is. You see, when you think of Tennessee football, you probably think air raid. They want to space you out. They want to throw the football all over the field on you. But they got the fourth best rushing attack in college football, which is really surprising. They got a really good group of running backs. They also have Joe Milton, who's a really good athlete in his own right. So this rushing attack is going to be really key for Missouri being able to come away with this win, because if Missouri can't slow down Tennessee's ground game, I think that Tennessee probably wins this game. Missouri's defense is solid, but I don't know if their defense is going to be able to hang around if Tennessee's able to play bully ball. Tennessee also has a good amount of talent at receiver. Missouri, their secondary is solid, but I don't know if they're equipped to be able to hang around if Tennessee wants to try to take a couple of shots downfield, if they can get that run game going. If Tennessee gets the run game going, it opens up so much for this offense. Play action. There's just so much they can do if they get the run game going, which is why it's pivotal that Missouri can slow down this rushing attack. And Missouri's rushing defense isn't that bad. They're kind of in the middle of the pack. They're 34th in college football in rushing yards per game allowed. I think what this game is going to come down to is which team is going to be able to have a better night getting after the quarterback. Tennessee has a really good pass rush, and so does Missouri. Which quarterback is going to have the better performance? Is it going to be Brady Cook, or is it going to be Tennessee with Joe Milton? You see, Brady Cook, he's a really good athlete. He's a really sneaky runner. He knows how to pick his spots, and he does do a pretty good job at extending plays at times, but as a passer, he can be hit or miss. So what Brady Cook are you going to get? Are you going to get the Brady Cook that you saw during the first half of this season, or are you going to get the Brady Cook that we've seen over the last couple of weeks? I don't think Tennessee's secondary is that great. It's not bad. It's definitely better than what it was last year, drastically better than what it was last year, but with the wide receivers that Missouri has, Luther Burden, he right now is listed as questionable on the injury report. Even if he doesn't play in this game, they still do have a good amount of talent and depth at wide receiver. Now, losing Luther Burden for this game, if he does get ruled out, is going to be a significant loss because he's one of the best players in college football, but I think Missouri can find a way to overcompensate for that loss. They got depth and talent at wide receiver. They have the ability to run the football. These are two teams that are extremely balanced and extremely similar. I feel that Missouri is going to walk away with the win because they're playing at home. I also think that they just are a slightly better team all around than what Tennessee is. You see, Missouri, I really like their defensive front. I like Tennessee's defensive front also. But Joe Milton, at times, this offense has been a little bit too dependent on trying to get big plays when the run game isn't there. I think Missouri is just an all-around better, more complete team than Tennessee. They're a balanced team. They can do both. At times, Joe Milton can be hit or miss when he tries to throw the football downfield. Brady Cook, I think, is a better runner than what Joe Milton is. And I know Tennessee fans are going to get upset with this, but Missouri, this just is one of those years where I think they're in for a really big season. And I think that right now, they're the better team than what Tennessee is, even though the gap isn't that big. They got a really good pass rush. They were able to challenge and hang with Georgia. It wasn't a blowout. Georgia still won in the end by 9, but, if Missouri has a little bit more success in the red zone, I think they're able to come away with a potential upset. And it's not like Missouri never had a chance in that game. Like, anytime you can really challenge Georgia up front, you got a really good front seven on defense. And I think Missouri's defense is better than Tennessee's, and that's why I'm going to take them to win this game. You see, Tennessee, with how good their rushing attack is, if they can get that going, then I like their chances to win. But I feel pretty confident about Missouri's ability to slow down the run game and force this to become a game where Joe Milton has to drop back and win with his arm, which, at times he has the ability to do, but he hasn't been super consistent with it. Give me Missouri with the win. 27-24 is my final score prediction in this game. We got Utah going on the road to take on the Huskies, man. The last time we saw Utah play in the big-time game, they got blasted by Oregon. Are they going to suffer the similar fate to a Washington team that is coming off a big win against USC? Washington is a 9.5-point favorite for this game. And for Utah to win, they're going to have to find a way to get the pig farmer Bryson Barnes playing back at the level that he did against USC. You see, it's easy to look good when you're going against Alex Grinch's defense. That's why he no longer is the DC of USC anymore. Washington's defense is not that great. So I definitely think that Bryson Barnes should be able to have a way better performance in this game than what he did against Oregon. Oregon just looked like a way more complete team than Washington at this point, even with Washington beating them. Now, Utah's defense is the best in the Pac-12, one of the best in college football. And is this defense going to be good enough to hold Washington? I think it can. The only problem with that is when if your defense is able to slow down Washington's passing attack, is your offense going to be able to put some points up on the board? You see, the way that Utah wins games is that they want to keep it close. They want it to be low scoring because they're a scrappy football team. All Utah wants is a chance in the fourth quarter. If you're Washington, you want this game to be over by halftime. If this becomes a game where Utah has to win by driving the length of the field, throwing the football, and the run game isn't there, they're in a lot of trouble. Washington doesn't have a good run defense, but there's more than one way to stop in the run. You either can stop it on the field with your defensive line or your defense, or you can get out to such a big lead where the lead is too much for a team like Utah to try to run the football, trying to get back into the game. And also, Jaquindon Jackson, one of Utah's best running backs on their team, is questionable. They don't really have the injury listed, but all I know is that he's questionable for this game with a questionable injury. We don't know what it is, but if he doesn't play, that's going to be a big loss for them. Now, they had a running back that was going off against USC a couple of weeks ago named Sione Vaki, and anytime they try to get him involved against Oregon, Oregon shut him down. You're going to have to find more ways to get your playmakers the ball outside of just overutilizing your running back in the passing game. Washington, Their pass defense, I don't really think is all that great. Their secondary is inconsistent, and they don't really have that much of a consistent pass rush neither, which is why USC was able to have the success that they had on offense. Utah offensively, this isn't a game where you're going to be outclassed defensively. You should be able to put some points on this Washington defense, and this can be a game that can be in Utah's favor. And Utah can play the style of football they want to as long as their defense can play well and you can have an efficient rushing attack. Now, if you're Washington and you're Kalen DeBoer, you're probably saying, okay, that's easy. All we got to do is stack the box, stop the run, and force Utah to beat us through the air, which sounds easier said than done because Utah still has a really good offensive line. They got a really good group of running backs. It's like it doesn't matter who they have at running back. For some reason, Utah just has unlimited good running backs. It's like they lose a good running back and another one comes in. They lose another good running back and another good one comes in. Utah, they have to be able to generate big plays in the passing game out of their receivers. All right, you just can't rely on Sione Vaki to be your only reliable option in the passing game. You need some of your other wide receivers to step up, like Money Parks, for example. You also have Devon Veely there. Like, you need your receivers to step up in this game. Utah, that's not really their strong suit. They're not really super deep at wide receiver, and they don't have great quarterback play. And the way they're going to win this game is by being able to impose their will on the ground. But at the same time, you still have to be able to play complementary football. Because if you run the football every play, Washington, they're going to stack the box and you're going to play right into their hands. You got to be able to take advantage of a lackluster pass rush and a very questionable secondary. For Washington, you can't beat yourself in this game. Washington has the tendency to start games out a little bit slow. Now, against USC, last week, they hit the ground running. But against Arizona State, they struggled in that game. And against Stanford, they struggled in that game. They got out to a little bit of a slow start. If Utah can get Washington playing their off ball early in the first half, and they can keep this game close going into the fourth quarter, you feel really good about Utah's chances being able to win this game because Washington doesn't have a defense that's going to stifle you. They don't have a defense that is going to make Bryson Barnes look like how he looked against Oregon. They don't have the same pass rush, and they don't have the same guys in the secondary. Washington is one of those teams that is just going to outscore you and just hope that your offense isn't able to outscore them. That's why they're undefeated. If this ends up becoming a low-scoring defensive kind of battle, you like Utah's ability to win it. And that's the kind of style of football that Kyle Whittingham and company want. The only question is, are they going to be able to execute that style of football? Are they going to be able to keep this a low-scoring game? This defense has been able to show the ability to slow down some of the better offenses. But at the same time, though, when we saw them go up against USC, their defense couldn't hold up. When we saw them go up against Oregon, their defense couldn't get a stop to save their life. It's like Oregon was going up and down the field at will. And if this performance ends up going the same way that it did against Oregon, they're going to be in a lot of trouble. Like, you cannot win this game if you don't have efficient quarterback play out of Bryson Barnes, and if your defense can't play the same way that it did somewhat against USC and some of your better games that you played in this year. Now, Washington's defense, as I said earlier, is not all world. It's not that great. It's just as bad. Well, I'm not going to say it's just as bad as USC's because their defense is poverty. But their defense is not that great. I don't think that Washington's defense should be able to keep Utah to 10 points or less. Utah should at least be able to hit 17-20. If Utah can put up the amount of points that they did against USC, they should be able to put up half of that against Washington. Washington can't get pressure on the quarterback, and they don't have a good secondary. And regardless of the fact that Utah doesn't have a lot of talent and depth at receiver and quarterback, they should still be able to do a good enough damage with them being balanced, them being able to mix in the run in the pass. That's how they're going to be able to win this game. And Bryson Barnes is a pretty underrated athlete. So you can utilize him on design quarterback runs. What makes this game tough for Utah is that you got to go on the road and win at Husky Stadium. It's a really tough place to win at. We saw Oregon lose. Utah, I think they're probably going to suffer the same fate. I'm going with Washington to win. It's just hard for me to pick Utah to win just because their offense is not that great. And even though I feel really confident about Utah's offense being able to put up at least 20, 24 points in this game, eventually their defense is going to get tired. They're going to get worn out, and Washington's offense is going to start the hum eventually. Now, if Washington comes out and they have the same performance that Oregon did against this defense, then they're probably going to win this game in blowout fashion. But I think that Utah, with how bad Washington's defense kind of has played over the last couple of weeks, they should be able to hang around with Washington in this game. They don't have an all-world defense that can make you pay for having a guy like Bryson Barnes at quarterback. But at the same time, though, the thing with Washington is that even though their defense isn't great, with the way Utah kind of is structured offensively, them being a run-first team, you don't need your defense to get stops every single possession because you know that there's a good chance that eventually your offense is going to get rolling and Utah isn't going to be able to keep up. And when their offense is being inefficient, it puts their defense on the field for way more plays than what they would like to be. They get tired, they get worn out, they get fatigued, and that's when Washington can start delivering the knockout punches. You see, for Washington, if this ends up being a game that kind of is low scoring and it kind of is in Utah's favor, as long as your defense doesn't allow the kind of performance that USC had against Bryson Barnes and the Pig Farmer, you're good. Like, you'll be okay giving up 24 points to Utah as long as you're capable of being able to put up 30. And I don't think that this defense is going to be able to hold you for too long. This offense, even though your defense isn't great, they're not the kind of offense that can take advantage of a not so great defense like how USC was able to do. And they don't have the same level of quarterback. I like Washington to win this game. 38-24 is my final score prediction. I think Utah can hang around, keep this thing competitive. But in the third quarter and onwards, I think that's when Washington starts to deliver those big knockout blows. I think for Washington, you just got to deliver body blows for the first couple of quarters with Utah. And Utah's a scrappy team. But the fact that Utah's offense has to find different creative ways to move the ball. Like, there was one game I was watching, I think it was against Oregon, where our special teams, they got a kick return or a kickoff, and they ended up tossing it back to the other kick returner, and he ended up giving Utah good field position. Utah really can win this game only two ways: great defense and great special teams. Their offense, you're just going to have to hope and cross your fingers that it can be serviceable if you're a Utah fan, and it should be, going up against a lackluster defense. But even then, Washington's defense, although it's bad, it's not USC bad. So I doubt that they're going to be giving up the same amount of big plays that USC did. At least Washington's defense can get a couple of stops or two. And when Washington's defense gets those 2 or 3, 4 big stops, that's when their offense is going to start to get those big plays downfield. And that's when this game is going to start going in Washington's favor. We got Ole Miss and Lane Kiffin going on the road to Athens, Georgia. I am so excited for this game, man. Last week, we saw Georgia beat Missouri. I don't think it was a clean win by Georgia. There definitely were some things that kind of concerns me in this game if I was a Bulldogs fan, because you're going up against the best offense that you've seen all season, and you're not going to face an offense as good as Ole Miss for the rest of the season, even when you do play Tennessee and when you make it to the SEC championship game potentially. Ole Miss, this offense is legit. Jackson Dart has been playing some really good football as of late. He's done a good job of taking care of the football. He also is really good when he decides to tuck and run. So you're going up against a true dual threat quarterback. You got an Ole Miss offense that has a lot of talent at wide receiver. They're super deep at that position. You're going up against Quinshon Judkins, one of the best running backs in all of college football. This could potentially be a ball game. I don't think that Georgia is going to run away with this game. I think that this game is going to be pretty close. Because when I look at Georgia's secondary, and I know a lot of Bulldogs fans get mad at me when I talk about the secondary, but I don't think this secondary is all that great. Last week against Missouri, Brady Cook and these Missouri receivers were killing Georgia's secondary anytime they went back shoulder. Anytime Brady Cook and these receivers attempted a back shoulder throw, it was money nearly every single time. Now, the secondary isn't dog water. Like, the secondary isn't garbage. This is definitely still a really solid and respectable secondary. But Georgia's secondary hasn't played at the level this season that we've been accustomed to seeing the past couple of seasons. And with how potent this Ole Miss passing attack is, you definitely, if you're a Rebels fan, feel really confident about your ability to throw the football on this Georgia defense. This also is a offense that has a really good ground game. And Missouri had a good amount of success running the football against Georgia last week. Missouri's running back, Cody Schrader, ran for 112 yards. He was averaging 5.1 yards per pop, and he had a touchdown. And let's not forget when Auburn nearly beat Georgia, and they ran for damn near 200. And you're going up against a mobile quarterback with a really good rushing attack and a really good running back to go along with it. Ole Miss offense should be able to put some points up. Not even some points. They should be able to put up a good amount of offense and a good amount of points on this Georgia defense. Now, if you're a Georgia fan, you're probably going to counter down and say, well, JT, the last time Ole Miss faced a defense that was halfway as good as ours, Alabama, they got shut down. They got held to 10 points. And you're right about that. But was that really Alabama's defense being that good? Or was that Ole Miss offense just having an off day? You look at what Missouri did to you last week. Why can't Ole Miss have that same performance and then some? And it's not like Missouri's offense was going crazy or anything like that. But Jackson Dart is a better quarterback than what Brady Cook is. And the key to beating Georgia is you got to have two things. You got to have great quarterback play, which Jackson Dart has showed this season, and you got to have an elite group of wide receivers, which Ole Miss has. Georgia's defense, anytime they go up against a team that has a lot of depth and talent at wide receiver that matches up with what they have in the secondary, they tend to struggle. Good example, when they went up against Ohio State in the semifinals last year. And I'm not comparing this year's Ole Miss team to last year's Ohio State team. But I do think when you look at what Ole Miss has at wide receiver and quarterback, it gives them a really good chance to walk away with the win in this game. I have a lot of confidence in Jackson Dart and Lane Kiffin's offense. The only concern of mine is this offensive line and how Ole Miss performs on third down. They have a terrible third down offense, and their offensive line, when it comes to pass blocking, is not that great. And we know that even though this Georgia defensive line, hasn't been as stout as what it's been the past 2 years, it's still a really good defensive line. They were able to get after Brady Cook last week. Ole Miss, they're going to have to find a way to win this game without giving up major losses when it comes to sacks. You're going to have to find a way to win on first and second down, which is easier said than done. If you get put in a third down situation on this Georgia defense, you definitely like Georgia's chances to be able to get off the field. Missouri, they were able to find a way to somewhat stay competitive against Georgia. Even though there wasn't really too many moments during last week's game that Georgia-Missouri played where it felt like Georgia was in major trouble, it really was because Brady Cook wasn't able to be accurate. He wasn't able to make good decisions with the football. Jackson Dart is a way better quarterback than Brady Cook. And if Ole Miss is going to be able to win this game, they're going to need him to have a big-time performance, which I definitely think he has the ability to do so. I don't think Georgia's secondary has been that great. They didn't look good against Vanderbilt. They didn't really look all that great last week, in my opinion, against Missouri. Now, they may not have been as bad as what I initially thought rewatching the game, but Missouri was able to get a couple of big plays here and there, especially when they decided to throw those back shoulder throws. And with the talent that Ole Miss has at wideout and quarterback, you mean to tell me that you don't think they could have a better offensive display than what Missouri had? Especially with them having a guy like Quishon Judkins in the backfield, one of the best running backs in this conference, averaging nearly 5 yards per attempt and has 12 touchdowns on the season. Now, what gives me a lot of reason to be concerned about Ole Miss' ability to give Georgia their first loss of the season is this damn defense. I don't trust Pete Golden's defense. And I'm pretty sure a lot of Georgia fans are writing that in the comment section right now. Like, okay, JT, you talked enough about Ole Miss offense. We get it. Ole Miss has a really good offense. But even against Georgia's defense, I'm having a hard time seeing Ole Miss going up and down the field every single possession against a Georgia Bulldogs defense. Georgia's defense is going to come away with a couple of stops, and they may come away with a turnover or two. Ole Miss defensively, if you're Pete Golding, can you find a way to get Carson Beck and company off the field? I don't know. When they beat LSU, that was a high-scoring affair. That game damn near could have put up 1,000 yards of offense, and it could have resulted in 100-plus points being scored. If Ole Miss can't find a way to get off the field defensively, then I think Georgia's going to go up and down the field on them. The only good thing about Ole Miss defense, surprisingly, is the fact that they got one of the best pass rushes in all of college football. They are really good when it comes to getting pressure on the quarterback. They got multiple guys up front and at the linebacker position that can do it and at a really high level. And we saw last week, Georgia's offensive line at times struggle with the defensive line of Missouri. And Missouri has a really good defensive front. But Ole Miss, their defensive front, maybe even better when it comes to their ability to generate consistent pressure on the quarterback. Your only problem that if you're Ole Miss, is your run defense going to be able to slow down Georgia's rushing attack? Georgia's a truly balanced football team. They play complementary football. They don't need to rely on just one trick to beat you. They can beat you throwing the football, and they can beat you running that thing up your face through the middle. If Ole Miss can't find a way to get Georgia in third and long situations and obvious passing situations, I don't think it's going to vote well for them. And I just, to be honest with you, don't really trust their defense all that much. I'm not a really big fan of Pete Golding. Like, is the defense better than what it was last year? Yeah, but not by that much. They're 73 in passing yards per game allowed, so they don't really have a great secondary. Their run defense is middle of the pack. If you're Kirby Smart and you're Georgia's offensive coordinator and Carson Beck, you're licking your lips right now. You're licking your chops because you think that this is a game where you damn near could put up 40 or 50 on this defense. I'm taking Georgia to win this game. I love Ole Miss offense, and I do believe that this is going to be the most points that Georgia's defense gives up all this season to this offense because I believe that it's that good. But Ole Miss doesn't have a defense. And regardless of how good I believe Ole Miss offense is, the only way that they really can win this game is if they score nearly every possession. Because I don't see Ole Miss defense being able to get too many stops on this Georgia offense. They don't have a great secondary. They got a great pass rush, but they don't really have that great of a run defense. Like, I trust Georgia's defense to get way more stops in this game than I trust Ole Miss. And that's why I got to go with the Bulldogs. I'm taking Georgia to win. Final score, 42-28. Maybe 31 at most. But you got to remember that Georgia's playing at home. It's really tough to beat Georgia at home. And although they haven't been the same dominant team at home this year that they've been in the past, this is still a really tough place to win at. The crowd noise definitely is going to be a factor. I like the Bulldogs to win. If Ole Miss had a way better defense, they probably win this game. But Georgia's defense is still good enough that it's going to get a couple of stops, even though they're going up against a really good offense. And Georgia's defense isn't bad. Let me make that clear. I'm not making it seem like Georgia's defense is awful. It's just that with how they match up against Ole Miss offense, they say styles make fights. And the key to being able to have success on Georgia's defense is having good quarterback play and a good group of wide receivers, which Ole Miss has. It's just that I don't think Ole Miss is up to par up front. And you also got to have a good offensive line. And plus, your defense also has to have the ability to get off the field, which I don't think Ole Miss is going to be able to get off the field too often on defense unless they can find a way to get Georgia in obvious passing situations. That's why I'm taking the Bulldogs. Arizona is going on the road to take on Coach Prime and the Buffs, man. The Buffs right now, they're on the 3-game losing streak, man. Meanwhile, Arizona, they're one of the hottest teams in college football. They've won 3 straight. They beat UCLA, Oregon State, Washington State. They got a really underrated offense with some good receivers, a decent offensive line. They got a good young quarterback in Noah Fafita, who's looked on fire as of late. He has 14 touchdowns to 4 interceptions, and they got a really good pass rush and a really good run defense, which doesn't vote well for Coach Prime and the Bucs because their offensive line the last 2 weeks has played as bad as it has all season long. They gave up 7 sacks against UCLA. They struggled to protect Shedeur against Oregon State. The last 2 weeks, Colorado's offensive line has basically told opposing defensive lines, it's a buffet out there. It's an all-you-can-sack on Shedeur Sanders. Colorado, they really need to win this game if they want to have an opportunity to become bowl eligible. I don't really think they got that big of a chance to upset Utah. So their 2 winnable games come against Arizona in this matchup and when they play Washington State. And Arizona, this isn't the team that I initially thought it was going to be when Colorado was set to play them a couple of weeks ago. Well, when I initially was looking at this game a couple of weeks ago, because I didn't think Arizona was going to be that good. I thought Arizona was going to be a middle-of-the-road Pac-12 team, and they've been better than that. They've been one of the better teams in the Pac-12 this year, and it shows with their wins over UCLA and Oregon State. Arizona's defense is pretty solid, but you definitely like Colorado's ability to put up points on Arizona's defense. And this is probably the best offensive display that Colorado could put on in this performance, in this game in the last couple of weeks. I mean, the last couple of weeks, Colorado's offense has not looked the way it did earlier this season when they were 3-0. And the main reason for that is because of the offensive line. Now, they changed play callers. They went from Sean Lewis to Pat Shurmur, and we didn't really see too much of a change. Are we finally going to notice some change with the play calling in this game? Are they going to put more emphasis on running the football? Are they going to put more emphasis on leaving in an additional tight end or running back to pass protect and help keep Shedeur upright? I guess we'll see, but offensively, Colorado should be able to put up at least 27 or 30 points on Arizona's defense, regardless of how much pressure Arizona's able to get. I don't think Arizona's secondary is that good. Colorado's receivers are just as good as any other team's receivers in this conference outside of USC and Washington. As long as you can give Shedeur a little bit of time to throw the football, you should be able to have success on offense, regardless of who's calling the plays. Defensively, Colorado's defense has played really good the last 2 weeks. They played good against Oregon State, and they also played good against UCLA. It's just that the offense has let them down with how inefficient they've been because of their inability to protect up front. Now, I believe that Colorado's offensive line is going to have the best game that they've had in over the last month or so. Yes, Arizona has a really good pass rush, but I don't think it's as good as what UCLA and Oregon State had. Now, they still got a really formidable pass rush, but I don't think they're going to be getting to Shedeur the same way that we saw UCLA and Oregon State and company being able to get after Shedeur. Now, of course, they're going to have 3-4 sacks in this game. That's a given because when has Shedeur ever had a game where he's been throwing out of a clean pocket for the whole entire game? Never. Not all this season. So he's accustomed to it. But I think with Shedeur Sanders in this game, he really is going to be the difference maker in Colorado being able to keep this thing close. You see, last week, Arizona was like a 6-point favorite in this game. Now they're 11-point favorite based on how they played last week and how they've looked like one of the hottest teams in the Pac-12. But at the end of the day, this is a conference that is notoriously known for having a lot of late season upsets. And as long as you can protect Shedeur and you can give him time to throw the football, Colorado should be able to hang around in this game. Arizona, at times, their young quarterback can be a little bit careless with the football. I definitely expect him to give Travis Hunter a couple of interceptions. And the way Colorado's defense has played, you feel comfortable with them being able to slow down this Arizona offense. The only question is, can Colorado make the most of when their defense is able to get off the field and get stops and get the ball back to the offense? That's the thing. Colorado hasn't done a great job at playing complementary football. That's what has hurt Colorado. And if you're a Jet Fishing Company, you feel really confident that your defensive front should be able to replicate the same success that UCLA and Oregon State were able to have. But I don't know about that. Yes, you do have a good pass rush, but I don't know if it's as good as UCLA. UCLA has one guy that potentially could be a top 5, top 10 pick in next year's draft. And I don't know if you quite have that good of a secondary to hold these receivers. So I'm expecting Colorado's offense to put up some points, but Arizona offensively, they can put up a lot of points in their own right. And as I said, this is a really big game for Colorado because you're 4-5 right now. Your season is pretty much in free fall mode. You need this win to become one game closer to becoming bowl eligible. And if you win against Arizona, which you have a good chance of being able to pull off this upset because, for one, you're playing at home. 2, you got the quarterback advantage. 3, Arizona's pass rush isn't as good as what you've seen the last 2 weeks. So you should be able to have your best performance on offense that you've had in the last couple of games. I'm taking Colorado to get the upset. They're playing at home. They're a huge underdog. I like Shedeur Sanders to have a really big time performance. I'll say around 3-4 touchdowns, no interceptions, and I think this offensive line can hold up enough where Colorado's offense should get back to playing that the way that we saw at the beginning of this season when they went 3-0. The last game we got to talk about, we got USC traveling to Eugene to take on Oregon. It's really hard to win at Athens Stadium. All right, and USC is a 16.5 point underdog going into this game. Now, many people believe that Oregon is going to beat the shit out of USC. I don't think that's going to happen. Now, I'm not saying Oregon is going to lose, but all I'm saying is that as long as USC can protect Caleb Williams and that offensive line can hold up, I don't think Oregon's defense is going to shut out USC. Okay, Oregon's defense is pretty good, but USC's offense is still one of the best in college football, as we saw last week when they played against Washington. And as long as you have Caleb Williams, you always have a chance to win. Okay, I'm never going to count out USC with them having Caleb Williams at quarterback. Oregon has Bo Nix at quarterback. And I do believe that this is going to be a high-scoring affair. The question is, can USC's defense get some stops? Because against Washington, if you was a Trojans fan, you were just praying with your fingers crossed, please just give us a stop, please. Caleb Williams, Lincoln Riley, they were looking at Alex Grinch like, bro, can your defense stop a nosebleed? If USC's defense can get a couple of stops in this game, this is a game that could go either way. But can you really expect that to happen? Yes, you did finally move on from Alex Grinch, but whoever's calling the plays defensively, there's only so many changes you can make because you just can't change the scheme this late into the season. And the play calling, yeah, that might improve, but overall, is the defense just going to perform at a way better level? I doubt that firing Alex Grinch is going to make USC's defense all of a sudden play all world. USC, they don't need to get a lot of stops to win this game, but you at least need to get at least 4 or 5 big ones and big moments and get the ball back to your offense in the fourth quarter, which I doubt USC is going to have the ability to do. Oregon's offense, their offensive line is stout. Their rushing attack with Bucky Irving is stout. Bo Nix has been lights out all season long. Oregon, defensively, you trust them to get way more stops in this game than USC's defense. And USC's defense, at most, they may get 2 or 3 stops. And are those 2 or 3 stops going to be enough for them to win this game? I don't know. Their offensive line hasn't really been that great this year. Oregon's defensive line looks really formidable. Their secondary has looked pretty good, but USC has a lot of talent at wide receiver. And I just have a hard time seeing this game go in direction of a blowout with how much talent USC has offensively. If this is a blowout, if anything, it's going to be a high-scoring blowout. Either Oregon wins this thing 70-56, or Oregon's winning this thing 63-54. I don't think Oregon's going to come into this game just because they're playing at home and they're just going to roll USC up in the blunt and smoke them. I would be really surprised if Oregon wins this game like 42-7 or 42-14. You may go back and you look at Caleb Williams' performance against Notre Dame and you say, well, JT struggled in that game. How many games are you going to see Caleb Williams throw 3 interceptions? Oregon has a really good defense. They got a better defense than Washington. And that's not even a discussion right now. But I don't think Oregon's defense is all world to the point where they're going to be good enough to pitch a shutout. If anything, their offense may score every single possession, and USC may score on every single possession but 3 or 4, and that's what might decide the game. You see, Caleb Williams is just too good of a quarterback for you just to overlook and say, yeah, they're going to get blown out. USC has talent at wide receiver, running back. Their offensive line hasn't been great, but I don't think it's bad enough where Oregon's just going to outclass them up front with the same way that they did Colorado. And who is Oregon's best win? They lost to Washington. Their defense didn't really have a lot of big stops in that game. At least not when it mattered the most, because Washington still went down and scored and won the game. Meanwhile, you look at what their defense did against Colorado and Utah, your defense played well against lackluster offenses. But let's see what Oregon's defense does against one of the better offenses in all of college football, led by the most talented quarterback in the nation right now. Caleb Williams, as long as he plays his A game and he doesn't have a performance that he had against Notre Dame and he can pick up from where he left off last week, I don't see this game being a blowout. Oregon is a really good team, but they don't have to blow out USC to be regarded as one of the top teams in college football. I don't think that's kind of their style. Their style is their defense can get a good amount of stops, more stops than Washington's defense, and they can outscore you. But at the end of the day, the kind of team that Oregon has is based on being able to outscore everybody that they play. Their defense is solid, but I don't see their defense shutting down this USC offense. Lincoln Riley is too good of a play caller. Caleb Williams is too good of a quarterback. And the personnel that he has around him is too good to get shut down by this Oregon defense. Now, if this was Alabama's defense or Georgia's defense, then I would feel differently. But I truly would be incredibly shocked if USC just got blown out in this game and they didn't belong on the same field with Oregon. This is an offense that can go toe-to-toe with anybody as long as you got Caleb Williams at the helm and you can give him a little bit of protection. I'm taking Oregon to win, though. I'm not crazy. I'm not going to go with any crazy upset because, first of all, it's really hard to win at Athens Stadium. I can't remember the last time Oregon lost a home game in this stadium. They got one of the best home field advantages in all of college football. Plus, USC, even though they fire Alex Grinch, and even if he is as bad as a DC where the next interim guy comes in and he looks a little bit more competent than him, I still don't think it's going to matter all that much because at the end of the day, USC under Lincoln Riley, a lot of people say this defense, it's an attitude problem with it. It's not just a coaching and X's and O's thing. This defense just doesn't have the kind of attitude that you need to be a championship caliber defense. And I don't think that this defense is going to have enough in them to be able to get crucial stops in this game when it matters the most to get the ball back to Oregon. I know that Oregon's defense can get some stops. I don't know if USC can even get a stop or two. Give me Oregon to win. 48-35 is my final score prediction for this game. This is it for this episode of the JT Sports Podcast. I appreciate you guys for tuning in. If you enjoyed tonight's episode, leave us a 5-star review. You can find us on all podcasting platforms, Apple, Google, Spotify, Amazon, wherever you get your podcasts from. The JT Sports Podcast is available. Rate us 5 stars. Share the podcast with your friends, family members, and acquaintances. Leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and I will see you guys tomorrow with another episode of the JT Sports Podcast.